How are we doing, everyone? Welcome back to yet another live stream. My name's Lewis, also known as MrCameraJunkie. If it is your first time here, make sure that you leave your name in the chat so that everyone here in the Camera Junkie crew could give you the warm welcome. And with that being said, as always, thank you for taking the time and spending it here with me, time being our most precious commodity, as always. Right off the bat, I just want to say hello to some people here waiting in chat. We have Dale hanging in here. Here we go. Also, Richard Sarkeesian is in the house. How are you doing? Randall as well, saying hello to me. How are you doing, Randy? Sly is in the house saying hi to me and to everyone. How are you doing, Sly? I've missed you in, the last, well, the more recent live streams. As you can notice, they've been a bit shorter, but I'm so glad that you were able to make it here today. And Randy's also just saying hi to everyone. All right, cool. Well, with that, we're going to get things started. Excuse me, just needed to clear my throat. And today we're going to be talking about new Sony cameras. We're going to be talking about the path, right? Is that how we would say it? The path, or the path that Sony would like to take this year, or their plans that they have. DJ Strick is here as well. What's up, man? Saying let's go. A pleasure to have you here. Well, last year I did a similar stream like this, and it's so funny to say last year, right? But yeah, and we had the roadmap. That's the word that I was trying to get to. The roadmap to what Sony was going to be releasing, and they pretty much stuck to it last year. They came out with the Sony Alpha 1, the FX3, quite a few cameras, the ZVE1, and I believe there was the FX series, there was the FX3. There was 4 cameras, and we went through them. I can't even recall them off the top of my head because we also had the Z9 and so many amazing pieces of hardware to come out in 2021. It was a pretty jam-packed year. 2022 is looking that, with all the shortages and the things that they've actually started to limit, is starting to get me to think of what Sony might be doing when it comes to the big corporation mentality. So if they halted production on the majority of APS-C cameras, and they've only held on to just a quite limited few, what we have available for, or what the roadmap for Sony's cameras this year, we have 2 of 3 cameras projected and 1 so-called mystery camera that we still are up in the air and having a lot of speculation. And that's actually the one that's actually taken a hold mostly of the rumor mills at the moment. So for example, Sony's camera lineup right now, their flagship camera is a Sony Alpha 1. That kind of trumped their Sony A9 II, which was prior to that moment holding that spot. It seems that Sony is not completely taking out the Sony A9 series with the Alpha 1. So it looks like in 2022 we're going to have another variation, which would be the Sony Alpha or the Sony Alpha 9 Mark III, which is very interesting, seeming that the Sony Alpha 1 has 30 frames per second in high burst, also has 50 megapixels. What I'm leading to believe is that it might be a camera similar to the Alpha 1 as far as functionality, but maybe it's going to take a drop in megapixels and also in price, meaning it will be a lot easier to keep that camera cool and reach the high rates of the Alpha 1 when it comes to the autofocus and burst rate at 30 frames per second, which is ridiculous. But With that being said, I think if they keep the Alpha 9 at 24 megapixels, which is where that line sits currently, and it doesn't take a bump, or maybe at most take a bump to the new 33 megapixel sensor that was just released in the Sony Alpha 4, Sony Alpha 7 IV, this is where it, it's still up in the air exactly when it comes to the specifications of these cameras, but the roadmap as of right now says that Sony is going to be releasing a Sony A9 Mark III and also a Sony A7R5. So that's going to be very interesting, because now to touch into that base, the Sony A7R4 currently has a 62.4 megapixel sensor, which is mind-boggling, but it just depends on where they're going to take the step up. If it's the R series, being that the nature R standing for resolution, I think it's going to be a camera that's very similar, but it also is going to have a bump in that specific field, or category. Where can you go? 80 or maybe even 100 megapixel camera, full frame, R series. If so, you're really talking about, excuse me, let me hydrate real quick. Well, the speculation is, I'm thinking maybe 100 megapixel, which will really start putting into the competition with the higher megapixel cameras like the GFX 100 from Fuji, things like that. So that's where I think that camera would fall into. The Alpha 9 still probably in the 24 to 33 megapixel with similar settings, or not settings but functionality, 30 frames per second, amazing autofocus, and most likely gonna have the new operating systems for all of these cameras. So this is what has already been released and leaked by Sony. And let's be honest, right? It could be Sony alpha rumors, but Sony releases the information that they want. I got something right here, and it just keeps creeping up, so we'll work through it. But I really think that that's where Sony will be throwing these cameras, in my opinion. Now, the mystery camera, right? The one that they just said, hey, here, a third camera's coming out. No other information is given. Really, it's all up in the air. The only thing that we kind of have sniffed out is that it is still a hybrid camera. It doesn't seem to be falling into like the cinema cameras in that category, but when they say mystery camera, it's literally still all up in the air. We have no idea. The rumors are that it's kind of like, when it comes to like the hype that's going on in the background, it's like one of two cameras, either being like the A7000 being a APS-C style, or an APS-C camera that's going to be a high-end and a body similar to their full-frame cameras, being like the A7 series, or the A5 series being a full-framed A6600 body style. Well, if you ask me, I would go for the latter. I actually think that just because of, me being one of the people who mentioned that if you were to take the specifications of an older camera, right, like an A7, even standard 24 megapixels, 5 frames per second, nothing out of this world, and put that into a small compact frame, you don't need IBIS, and you give me a flip-up screen that we have on the A61, 64, and 6600, and I believe that camera will sell like hotcakes. That's my opinion, right? And I mentioned that before. So now when those rumors were being speculated, the camera that actually was released by Sony was the Alpha 7C, the compact, which similar to it, but had the flip out screen that a lot of people were clamoring for on the A7 III. But if you followed me enough, you know I'm team flip up, and I highly recommend using the flip up screen over anything else. Excuse me. So with that, they released the A7C. Now that they've released the A7C and it's in the market, people have gotten their hands, and the people who actually wanted those changes from the A7 III series were extremely happy with that camera, because it gave them the flip out screen. The EVF wasn't great, obviously, but the simple fact that they were getting it mostly for the flip out screen, because that was the type of, footage, or they were going to be using it majorly for video, is why it fell into that niche. And for the price at $1,800, it's a pretty good deal, leaving you in the Sony E-mount and giving you all the flexibility of using those lenses. So now, seeming that it didn't hit quite perfectly 100% with everyone out in the market who was looking for this transitional type of camera, is where I think that I would lean my bets closer to the A5, being this mystery camera that might be coming out. Unless they really go out with a all new high-end flagship APS-C camera, which is a possibility. I mentioned here before as well the stacked sensor that Sony actually released to other manufacturers and the high frame rates that they were getting off of that. Also mentioning that Sony has used this technology themselves with the Sony ZV-1, and the ZV-1 giving you 240 frames and even 940 or 960 frames per second. In like super slow motion. These are going to be the new steps for the APS-C cameras moving forward, and that's where I would put my chips. If it's going to be a full frame camera, which I don't think, I think that it would be something leaning towards a replacement of the A7C series, or the A7C. So many abbreviations. I hope that I got all of these right, but we will march on. The A7C, right, the compact flip out camera, if they have a successor to that, maybe a Mark II, or like I said before, the A5 series being a completely compact, maybe, similar to like a A5100 or the same ZV-E10 body style. I would prefer a flip up screen over a flip out, but I digress. If it's a flip up, small, compact, full frame with only, because like my A6100 right now that you're looking at has no image stabilization, and whether I decide to use it in a lens or decide to use my 16mm Sigma that doesn't have it for tripod shots like this, or right now the 30mm off to the side, you can tell that IBIS is not always needed. So if you have an inexpensive camera that fits that criteria, you're gonna sell that thing. You won't be able to keep it on the shelf. Now, the thing that I think Sony is doing by canceling these cameras that are currently being produced right now is putting all of their resources towards these new cameras and the new type mystery camera. Apple, that we all love, everyone here most likely has an iPhone. If not, no worries. But Apple is such a big corporation that whenever they decide to make a change, it almost seems like they're doing it like after the fact. It almost seems like they need to wait for the technology to reach full saturation before they apply it into their systems, and that does fall a little bit into place. But the other thing that they do is that they stockpile the technology. So before Apple was able to make full transition to OLED LCDs on their iPhones, they also needed to recognize that for them to do so, they needed to meet the demand of an OLED screen on every iPhone that will be demanded by their clientele or their customer base. So before they're able to just make the transition, they can say we're moving to OLED, but they can't announce it, because for them to reach the numbers that they would need to actually put an OLED screen on every single iPhone that's going to be leaving their stores, they actually have to kind of build like a buffer, and they need to start taking in the technology and taking in the screens before they could apply them to their phones. For instance, if not, that they would actually reach a point where they are being limited by the amount of LCDs that they can actually get in house. I fall to a similar situation with the phone repairs. If I cannot get the screens that I need to do the repairs, I can't do the repairs. So Apple has to think in that type of mentality as well, because they have to stockpile their resources before they can start selling it out to the masses, just so that they can have an abundance of whatever it is that they're going to provide, to make sure that they can absolutely meet the demand that their client base is going to require of them. So that's what I think Sony is doing right now. Because the world is in the state that it is right now, resources are limited. So instead of producing cameras that in their own eyes is outdated technology, you know, it's not really outdated, but it's not the latest and greatest when it comes to their R&D. And if they want to bring that new technology out to the market, they're going to need to use their silicone, their hardware, their plastics, their resources towards those new projects, and then start creating those cameras and have a surplus on hand to be able to meet the demand, so that once that hits the market, they don't, honestly, not a knock to a much smaller company in Nikon, but kind of not look like Nikon, to produce a camera that everybody wants and nobody could really get, because they can't kind of produce them fast enough. So the way that I see Sony working right now is they're just stockpiling their technology to have an abundance, you know, an overflow of the cameras that they're going to be producing and releasing for this year. So that's what I have to say on these new mystery cameras. I would love to hear what you have to say in a comment or in the chat. I'm gonna get back to that, so let's get to it. All right. So where we left it said, let's go with DJ Strick. Here we have Mario saying hello, saying happy Olympics. You know what, talking about that I would hate to say it, man. I don't know if it's just me that I don't watch television anymore, because I don't. But I had no idea the Olympics are going on right now. It was kind of sad, because I believe they're getting like the worst ratings ever. And I don't know if this is like because of all of the lockdowns. I don't know if this is the like summer Olympics or if these are particular winter Olympics, but in all sincerity, it doesn't look good for it. Even the fact that I had no idea. You know, I'm gonna be honest with you as well. Before I even think of the Olympics, I'm thinking about the UFC fights that are going on right now as well. I'm doing this live stream, like the Robert Whittaker, Israel Adesanya, and that whole card of UFC 271. Oh man, I have plans to watch those tonight after the stream, while I do some editing that I need to catch up on some projects and some things to just cross off the list, because I'm getting some new projects coming in, which I'm really excited about. So things are just moving on the up and up. But let's just continue. We have John here saying hi. This is great to be here. Kevin Cox is in the house saying hello to all. Sly saying, seems like a major camera companies are introducing new cameras and they're all geared towards the top end. Be nice to see something new that didn't cost a full month's pay. I agree with that, right? But this is the whole thing. If I'm a business, and you know that's what these companies are, right? If you're only going to be able, right, physically to produce a certain amount of cameras because of the resources that you're limited to, you're going to put those resources in what's going to get you the most bang for your buck. And that is any business. So if all of the camera companies end up doing it, it's going to suck for us. But I totally understand, because now they need to have to recoup on all of their research and development, all of their advertisement, all of their employees, everything that they have invested into these cameras, and they're gonna have to make the most out of the least. There's not an abundance, so there's no way that they could actually, you know, just produce more cameras to like off-put the difference, right? It's just general business when it comes to it, and I feel you, because I know, look, I'm still using A6100s. I didn't even jump onto the new ZV-E10 that just came out, which is supposedly better, but the way that I see it is probably in the future I'm gonna grab me an A6600 on a good deal when it comes my way. There's a lot of other things when it comes to the gear that I need to upgrade that will benefit me a lot more than a new camera. And even though I love cameras, right? I'm a camera junkie and I would love to do it, I have to put myself on check and literally just say, hey, you know what? Take it a step at a time, because like I said, I love cameras, but I know that a better laptop, right, and me investing on making my way to social media marketing world coming up in about like 6 weeks, or not even like 5, or it's practically just like a month away now that I think about it, right? Just a month away, and I'm trying to see if I can budget that in. That one is being a lot more expensive than my trip to New York. You know, there's other things, the tickets themselves. I actually had an idea of doing it 2 ways, right? Either taking the flight with Aiden and booking the room and board, or actually taking like an extended 2 to 2.5 week road trip where I'm renting an RV. I started getting numbers, and they're very similar to the amount of money that would need to be invested to make the trip. But just right off the bat, right, just looking like around $3,500, and that's just to get over there, whether it's on plane with a hotel or renting an RV that actually takes care of the hotel aspect with me and Aiden. The other thing is that doesn't include food, it doesn't include fuel if I decide to take the RV. And the last aspect is the tickets for the event that are pretty expensive. You know, nothing taken away, but I believe they're like close to $2,000 for the tickets, or like $1,500 on sale. And that's where we're at. So I'm trying to see if I can finish up and get these jobs worked in so that I can get them, so I can budget that towards the trip to San Diego. But that's all the stuff that I've been doing this week as well. Look, I went on a rant from cameras being too expensive to trying to get to San Diego. It says none of these cameras are going to be released, because I actually think they are going to be released. I think they are, just for that same reason of the spiel that I just said, which is the simple fact that I think that they're just limiting their output on the cameras that aren't gonna make them the most bang for the buck. When, you know, like, why put money into a camera that's gonna sit on the shelf as an A6100 or an A6400 comparative to putting those resources in that silicone to a new camera, start building, you know, like your inventory in-house so that when you release it to market, you're able to sell as many or sell all of them, sell out. There's this place here in Pembroke Pines that sells donuts. Great donut shop called Mojo's Donuts. Talking about them, they're freaking phenomenal. Shout out to Mojo's. With that, what they do is that they bake a limited amount of donuts, and every day they sell out. They close the doors as soon as they sell out their donuts, and that way every day it's a win in the books and there's no loss. There's nothing that gets taken to the next day. The guy goes in there at like the crack of dawn, 6 o'clock in the morning, bakes his donuts for the day, leaves a couple of racks just in case there's some extras that need to get done. Once those are consumed, that's it. And usually by 5 o'clock p.m., that place is closed because all the donuts, on top of them being so good, are completely sold out. So there's nothing left. That's the type of mentality that I think Sony is dealing with right now, and all of these companies are dealing with. They're making the most of their resources. So if you were the donut shop, right, and you have a certain amount of dough to make donuts, you know that you're gonna make your best seller, the one that's gonna sell like crazy, and you're not gonna put, you know, like your time onto things that are gonna consume the amount of dough but sit on the shelf, right? So in that same mentality, hopefully that was a good analogy, you know, use your dough right, and that's what I think Sony is doing right now. They're stockpiling their silicon so that they could actually create the newer cameras for the new R&D and make the most of what they're doing now. John's got a question, and look at that. Yeah, if you do have a question, please put a Q on there. I will go through the chat and double check that I've answered all questions, but format it like this if you do have a question. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that like button. It doesn't cost you a thing, and it really does go a very long way in showing YouTube that we got something really good going on here with the CameraJunkie crew. All right, so the question was, can you comment on CF Express memory cards versus SD cards? UHS versus UHS2. Camera body is Sony A7S3. Okay, so the CF Express. My comment, it really depends on what you're doing. So if you're shooting a lot of video and you're recording that video to your memory card, if you want to unlock the full power of the A7S3, then what you're gonna want to get the CF Express memory card, even if it is just one, just so that you can have all the frame rates, everything like that. Someone like me, I actually just realized myself that on top of, you know, not having that hardware that requires the CF Express card, I'm still using the UHS2 or UHS memory cards, actually UHS, because I mostly use them for photography. But I digress. When I am using them for video or anything like that, my videos right now are not even being recorded to memory cards. Right now, what you're seeing here is how I do this entire setup is Ecamm. So with Ecamm, the same way that I can run a live stream and then I can do this entire production, I can easily just hit record and record a talking head portion onto my hard drive. Once it's on the hard drive, I don't have to insert a memory card to the computer because it's already there. So my next step is literally just open up Final Cut Pro, create, you know, the parameters for my scene, and then drag and drop the file that I just created onto a folder in my hard drive, onto the timeline and start editing right there. I was doing a video not too long ago. Actually, it was this week's video. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. I made a quick little video about the Sigma 16mm lens, my favorite lens that you're seeing right now. And I actually had made a previous video, and I was trying to find the B-roll shots that I had made for that video prior that I actually didn't put on the YouTube platform. That's a whole nother story. Then the whole thing is, I was trying to see if I could repurpose the B-roll that I made for that video, and I couldn't find it. So I started going through all my memory cards. Once I could not find the video files that I was looking for, I just said, you know what, forget it. And I decided to make new B-roll, which ended up being better, right? Because you put in new techniques, and actually the thing that made it to me a lot better was the acquisition of these lights right here. I got this mini focus light here, shooting in blue right now. This is the one that I use for the fireplace in the back, right? And then I got a Ulanzi one, which, let's see if we could take a look, right? If we're looking at the Ulanzi and now we're looking at the mini focus, they look pretty much identical. So because I was so happy with the mini focus, I decided to pick up the Ulanzi, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a video on what's inside. So I'm going to bust out my screwdriver and I'm going to open them up, and I'm going to see, on top of minor aesthetic differences on the outside, how different or how similar these two brands are on the inside. So that's something that I can't wait to get into. These are things that, like, I haven't opened those lights because I haven't set up my recording gig yet, so I'll get to that later. But I was able to shoot one in pink or magenta, the other in blue, and really saturate, you know, my camera and lens and get a whole new look of B-roll that I applied to the video that I just released. On top of that, I had a lot of fun doing it, and I was really happy with the results because it was one of the few times where I actually used a screenshot of my video as the thumbnail because I was so happy with the results. So that goes to show you, and trying to switch it up and be a little bit more, you know, like purposeful with your thumbnails, because they really are so important when it comes to your content. It is the poster of your movie, and that's the best way that I can put it. If you can't sell your video through the poster, right, through your thumbnail, no, everyone's just gonna pass it by, and nobody's gonna see how great your video is on the inside potentially. It's almost like, don't judge a book by its cover, but inherently you do on this platform. So make sure that your cover is on point. But once again, now to just completely put my final, you know, on it, to answer the question, if you have the A7S III, I would at least get one CF Express memory card. Doesn't necessarily need to be the biggest card. I believe 128 would be the smallest that I would get, just to make sure that it has enough capability or capacity to do all of the frame rates. And that's just to see if that's something that will work for you. For me, I'm kind of been spoiled right now, and that it goes back to it. I'm almost not recording away from Ecamm because of the simple fact that all the cameras I already have like saturated to the colors the way that I want them, right? And when you have the entire setup, it makes things easy, and I'm calling myself out on it, right? Just because of the simple fact that I don't want to have to import footage now that's not already like color graded, right? Having to make another like adjustment layer on the timeline and then start messing with colors and doing that stuff is just a process that I've completely avoided using Ecamm because I set all the colors correct, and once I'm happy with it, it's literally just press and go and off to the races. Okay, we have Gretchen in the house, Images by Gretchen, saying hello. How are you doing? Raphael saying happy Saturday. How are you doing, sir? Okay, Richard's got to go. Have a good weekend. Hopefully I got that enough time. I don't know how far behind I am on these on the chat. Before I could actually see the time because the cursor was bigger, but now I'm on this smaller little like confidence monitor. I can't read the time. Caleb's in the house. I am doing well, thank you. Louis Lazuka saying hello and saying happy Saturday, everyone. Okay, well, if I went through this correctly, it looks like I only had one question, but I would love to hear your thoughts on this. You know, now that we have Raphael here, I would love to get his thoughts on, well, actually, I kind of did because he mentioned it, and I watch all his stuff about the Canon 5C, the R5C, because everyone's saying all these great things about the camera. I don't shoot Canon anymore. That's fine, right? I don't have that big a deal. I'm on A6100s and they're on micro HDMIs, but I'm also not kidding myself thinking that these are cinema cameras, right? So the one thing that I think that Canon really just dropped the ball the biggest on that is pretty much the small HDMI, you know, whether it's the micro or the mini. Whatever it is that they're using that it's not full-size HDMI is just kind of like a slap in the face to their fan base, right? Their clientele base who's looking to get into the cinema, right? And they're saying like, oh yeah, you have, you know, the entire menu system on this 5C, but you're still limiting yourself to a little HDMI output, you know. And you look at the Sony FX, A7S III, and the ones that are designed just to be more video centric, you know. The FX, they call it the cinema line, but in my opinion, I think that, you know, I think we were all discussing it in chat in your live stream about, would you have given up the IBIS on the FX3 for internal ND? And this is something that I mentioned right off the bat. You can go to a live stream that I did about the FX3 when it was first announced, and I was like, I think that they went real lazy and literally majorly just put the internals of the A7S III into this new FX body. If they would have just made that one change to me and would have gave it the ND, right, the internal ND, and kept it as a fixed frame sensor, would have made more sense to me being a cinema camera, right? And then, you know, then you're gonna have everyone putting it on gimbals, which they do already, different things like that, or even use the gyro stabilization that is available through Sony. So with that, that's where I think that camera should have gone, and now people are knocking on Canon for removing the IBIS on this R5C, and that's the least of my concerns. I agree with what Canon did. They came out with IBIS on the 5C series, and whenever somebody tries to vlog with that camera or use it, you see the warpy corners. It could be amazing for stills photography, giving you those 15 stops of, you know, like internal image stabilization with the lenses and so on and so forth. It could be out of this world, but when it comes to video, you see the wobble in the sensor. So instead of them trying to do that, they go with active stabilization, which is to me the same thing as the, I would say, like, the active is kind of the same as the gyro stabilization that you get from the Catalyst Browse with Sony. So as far as the cinema camera goes, to me, I would think that the IBIS is less important than the internal ND. And if you can still get a gimbal-like shot handheld with gyro stabilization, where you can dial in how much stabilization, you know, through the Catalyst browse, I think would have made more sense to me to be a cinema camera, and also would have made a differentiating point or factor between the A7S III and the FX3. Because if that's a feature that you still prefer, like to say like, no, I prefer the IBIS over the ND, then in that case you still have the A7S III. But you know, you go to FX9, FX6, they don't have IBIS. You know, you go to Red Camera, Red Raw, all these cinema cameras, they don't have it, because for that type of work, I guess is not necessary as much. But let me see what you have to say, because you're literally in the field. It says the R5C will find a nice audience, just not for me. I prefer, okay, Raphael says, I prefer the IBIS over internal ND. I can ND and I can't add IBIS. You see, that's interesting. But you see, that's why I think that the gyro stabilization is something that is not being utilized as much. But I don't have these cameras, and I also don't dabble in those fields. But you know, one day I'm gonna get there, so I will have my opinion, you know, either confirmed or completely crushed when I get there. So Raphael says optical IBIS is much better than digital IBIS. But I also think that Sony's IBIS, whether it doesn't give you the most stops of, you know, like shake or image reduction, it's not off-putting when you see it. You know, it doesn't have those warpy corners and things like that that I've seen on so many cameras. And he says the Canon's new IBIS was a misstep on the art. That's very interesting. Oh, thank you very much, Gretchen. Gretchen bought me some coffee. I appreciate it. The caffeine is highly, highly appreciated when it comes to doing this. You know, it takes a lot. So, okay, Raphael says IBIS for photo. FX3 is a hybrid. FX6 or higher is video only. Okay. So that's what he says. And that's the whole thing. You know, the IBIS for photo, I have it on my A7R2, and I notice it every time that I half press the shutter. It works amazing for photography, just the same. Video, okay. I think my best combination when it comes to handheld stabilized footage right now is my... Actually, I should have it here. Yeah. Oh, I have the 85 on it right now, but it's my A7R2, and I run it with the Zeiss 24-70 f4, which also has OSS, so it's got the, what is it that they call it? The steady shot. So it's got the internal IBIS steady shot with the OSS optical stabilization, and that combination gives me really good handheld video, and I've been leaning toward that more than anything for like handheld B-roll. I just oversaturate it with light, throw these guys on it, oversaturate with some RGB, and then go to town, and that's been giving me really good results. But you know, in all sincerity as well, I also don't shoot raw or log or anything like that. I'm doing everything YouTubery, right? And one of these new lights that I got is this light right here, which I'm loving. This was I gotta give a shout out to Caleb Pike, DSLR video shooter, because I got my hands on these two lights, right? Oh, switch cameras. There we go. On the Ulanzi and the Mini Focus, because I got my hands on those, you know, these algorithms started recognizing that I was messing around with lights, and I was fed a video that I had seen a long time ago from DSLR Video Shooter. I watched it again where he went through a variety of RGB lights, and one of them is the one that you're seeing right here, which is this like sunset saliput, I believe is the name of it. I picked it up for $30. Really impressed with this RGB light. It's what you see right here. It's saturating my hand nice, and it's what's giving that projected cutoff in the background. $30, and I'm like absolutely changing up my entire setup. I took my Smith Victor lamp, which is, that one's the 720p. This is a 1,000-watt halogen like daylight lamp. That thing, I never turn it on because it is like turning on a little baby sun. That thing is so hot. You can fry an egg on it. You can't touch the glass or anything next to it when that thing is on. But what I did was grabbed a $5 RGB light strip from Walmart, Monster brand. So let me see if take a look at the remote, right? So this little Monster remote, and I took the RGB from it and threw it in there. I'll see you later, Raphael. Thanks for stopping by. And now I have the ability to, let me see if it, yep, change the light there. That's warm daylight, red, what I got, cool blue. Boom. Switching things up. Another thing is that that light is replacing the spotlight that I had that was in its place, which was what cast the blue onto me. And now that's actually, let's see if I can point to it, hanging right there. And now it's out of shot, coming from above. Oh, you can see my hand blocking the light a little bit. So I've taken the time to redo the setup here, and I'm really having a lot of fun with the lights that I was able to pick up and the way that I've been able to manipulate them. Having a lot of fun with that, and I think I'm good, because even over here on the top row of my cameras just above my head, I put another one of those strips as well, where I have complete control over the light and just messing around. I could even just go straight gamer mode and just have it run through the gamut of colors. So having a lot of fun with that. Tech for your needs. Nano just snuck in on the back door. He says you don't have to break the bank to get affordable equipment. What you need is good enough for quality. Absolutely. And that's exactly what I was saying. Like, there's a way to upgrade your skills, right? I think that that's what I was showing with this little lamp. Something that's a working piece of equipment that for photography works great, but at the same time I wasn't able to utilize. So I wanted to build the aesthetics, and I took a $5 cable strip, Monster brand here, right? Oh, focus, right? And that allowed me to change all of the aesthetics that I got going on here. So I'm having a lot of fun with the lights, and the reason why I kept everything the way it is, because if we look at this right here, I got a new softbox, but then also here I also got a replacement softbox. Now all of these are pieces of equipment that are multifunctional. Currently I'm using them for my live stream setup, but this is a Godox for a future strobe that I'm gonna get. This is, you know, the Godox AD200, which is a 1/8000th of a second, you know, sync for strobe photography. And actually, let me go back to it. This is a direct piece that gets clipped directly to it. So this is the smaller softbox that's part of that kit. And then this is just a bigger Godox softbox that I would be able to just throw that light into and still use the light on an even bigger softbox. So I have the best of both worlds. I don't have the light yet, but I know that that's going to be the next piece of equipment that I get for my photography needs. And instead of having to purchase these items once I get that or wait afterwards, I decided to jump the gun and get them ahead of time, because currently, instead of using the flash bulb that goes in them, I've used the same bulbs that I've been using for my entire setup that are completely controlled from my phone. So, needs to see my face to unlock Face ID. So the same way, I'm able to go into my app here, and look, shut off this light, which now cuts off the key there, turn off the other, because they're literally the same exact light bulbs that I had. I'm just using newer softbox fixtures in front of them. So okay, we got Gary Jones also coming in saying greetings everyone. Jim Mundy's in the house saying evening to me and the crew. Says gear does matter to a certain point, but make sure that you master what you have before you move on. Absolutely, that's part of what we do here and what we always talk about. Upgrade your skills before your gear, because there's a lot of gear, but also know your use case and know what is best for you, right? I know how to shoot an S-Log, I know how to grade it, I know how to color it, but I also know all the time and effort that it takes to do all of those things. So if I have a client that's hiring me to do a job for them and they ask for log footage and they want it like this because they want to deal with somebody else to deal with the color grading, so on and so forth, I know what I'm able to produce or how much to charge if they require me to do it in that manner. But for myself, like Raphael says a lot, fix it in camera and finesse it in post, right? So you fix it in camera, and if you got it right in camera, then everything's like all good in the hood, right? That's all you have to do. That's all you have to worry about. So for example, I love that I have my live stream set up to the point where the colors and everything is set up where I also create my pre-recorded content in the same way, and it's easy for me because I have all the pieces already set up to record every YouTube video and then record it in a memory card log to then put it in there and acquire all these extra steps I just mentioned earlier today. I record in Ecamm, it goes to a folder on my hard drive. As soon as I'm done recording it, once again, shout out to Raphael. I'm using a new program called Time Bolt, so it eliminates all the big pauses. I throw it in there, it cuts out all the big pauses. I take the HTML file, open it up in Final Cut Pro, and it literally opens up the entire file with all the cuts already in place. All I have to do is just the fine tweaking, and these are mostly for my videos because they're already color graded. I don't have to worry about another adjustment layer, so it's less hassle on the computer to do the work. So I'm throwing 4K video directly onto the timeline without proxies, getting right to work. It makes things a lot easier. And if most of my clients were to ask for the same type of, final result, I'll most likely be using the same type of, workflow. And that's it. But if it's not necessary to have S-Log, because that's the whole thing. I get complimented on my colors and my light scheme and everything here basically on a weekly on my live stream. And I appreciate it because I have a lot of fun. Like, for example, I take time to recognize like the difference between the shade of blue here, right, that you're seeing here, and the saturation of the line of the magenta right there, and where it's cutting off right behind my head. These are details that I pay attention to because I have fun doing that, you know, making sure that the overhead shot over here is giving you my setup and not my lenses, because there's plenty of lenses, but that doesn't show you more or less of what I'm dealing with comparative to, like, one thing I've never mentioned, shout out to PreSonus speakers. Those things have been great, but it goes to show you that it shows you everything. You can see my DBX 286X, my Zoom PodTrack Q4, how I do my sound effects with my iPad, my MacBook, my M1 Mini underneath it, softbox, teleprompter, monitor, screen, softbox. You can see everything, and I've curated this shot, just like, oh, not that one. Well, all of them, right? And this one as well. Like, everything that you see on screen has been planned out because this is what I have fun with. This is why I'm a camera junkie, and I love doing this aspect, but I love in the way that I do it as well, right? Try to find the easiest ways, the best workflow to get the best quality and the best production. Like my last, I've really started to notice it myself that my last, 3 videos, I would think, the last 3 or 4 videos have been like really short. They've been a couple of minutes the most. My last 2 videos are literally like a minute and 10 seconds and a minute and 13 seconds consecutively, because I'm getting to the point where I'm putting no extra information in my videos, and literally when it came to the comedy aspect, we just called it removing the fat. Just if it's not necessary, it's exactly that, not necessary. You need to cut it out. And with that, my videos have been a lot shorter and straight to the point. So I'm not sure if that's gonna continue to happen, because it all really depends on the subject matter, and I am a firm believer that a video should be as long as it needs to be. But with that being said, we'll see where it goes for this week. I believe the next video should be longer because the story is longer, but I digress. We have reached our hour time limit here, so if you do have any final questions, make sure that you put a Q in front of them. Give me a quick second. I have to go be a father real quick. Give me this. Okay. And I'm back. So if you do have any final questions, I'll give you a little time. Put a Q in front of it. I'm looking at the chat. But if not, then I'm going to have to say, as always, thank you for taking the time and spending it here with me. Time, as always, being our most precious commodity. It's something that we use and we never get back. So make the most of your everyday. Something that I try to do every day, and I try to encourage as many people as possible to do the same. Yep. Okay, so Gretchen says, whew. Glad the bears and wildlife I photographed didn't insist on all those lights. Hate to all that stuff backcountry hike. Yeah, that's a little bit different when it comes to outdoor photography. But good thing is that outdoors with natural light we have plenty of light, and that's what I always say. Like, if you're an outdoor photographer, you don't need the fastest lens, because most likely you're going to be stopping them down way past f4, so on and so forth. F8, f11s, that's usually what you're going to get. But when you're using 400 milliliters, English, Lewis, the words are hard today. I almost went an entire stream without butchering a word that bad. Milliliters, no. Back to it. If you're shooting with lenses longer than 400 millimeters, even at f11, you're going to have bokeh. You're going to have background separation. So just so that you know, if you didn't. Okay. Tech for Your Needs says, what is the app that you use for your sound effects? Okay, I'm gonna go to the bottom and I'm gonna put it in here. It's called Hundreds of Buttons. Oh, I didn't register it. It's literally the number 100 apostrophe S. So hundreds like that of buttons. And it should come up. The application was free, but then you pay like $2 or $2.99 to unlock it, and then you get the full access to the entire list. These buttons that I'm using on my iPad, and just so you know, let me go back to it. Take a look at this connector, bro. This is the fat boy. This is the fat boy connector, the 32 pin. This is an iPad Model 3, buddy. Okay, and because I had no other use for this iPad, but it wasn't broken, it was working, but I had no other use for it. I was fortunate enough to find this, and now it's an integral part of my live stream. That is just my. So make sure that you do hit that like button, okay?
Hey?
And do that if you haven't already. But yeah, so I have all of these, and I'm seeing what you can see on the screen right now. I'm going to remove, because the 2 pages that you're seeing here are just my favorites. This is the full like spectrum, so I'm just gonna start going through pages so that you can see quickly how many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sound effects. Scary organ. And they have different specifications. Some you have to hold down to keep like this, and as soon as you let go, those are usually marked with gold rings when it's, you know, a single sound effect. They're silver. So there's different variations that is just a single press to have a particular sound effect, like this one. And once it's done, it finishes, comparative to something like a fly buzzing around. That's gonna stay there as long as I hold down the button. But then I curated my favorites, right? And drum roll. And the fact that I like that you could actually overlap them right on the application. So for instance, if I was doing, you know, you could hear them both at the same time. They don't mix in. It's a really good application. So for $2.99, I totally repurposed my iPad and I use it on my live stream every Saturday. Okay, Craig. The question is, why not use a camcorder like a Panasonic VX981K for recording video contents for YouTube? Well, that's a good question. First of all, I started my entire journey on YouTube with photography cameras because I was already doing photography. So even when I started my live streams, it was only the hybrid cameras because I was already doing photography that gave me the ability to record video, that got me really more into the video side again. So for example, I was shooting with Canon for a while, and the best that I was getting was a 720 file from my Canon T2i, which wasn't great, and whenever it was shooting video, it had zero autofocus, so it was manual and made things a lot more difficult. It was only until I got my hands on the Sony a6000 and put a native kit lens onto it and really wasn't happy with the results, but I was able to see the functionality of the camera and what its abilities were, except that the final image, the final results, which is what we all work for, really wasn't something that I was happy with. So hence comes, do I have it here? Oh, I don't see it. I scattered around here, but I have a Metabones adapter, and this is the lens that I threw on it. Let's see if we can get to it. This is my Canon 50mm f1.4, and for my opinion, probably like the best bang for buck that you can get from your Canon EF lenses. I don't see that much of a difference, and I've never been called off, you know, for that not being the f1.2. Yeah, that's a $300 lens compared to a $1,300 or $1,400 lens. But I digress. I was able to adapt that with my Metabones adapter onto the A6000, and that's when the game changed. That's a very high quality lens, and once I was able to put good quality glass in front of that Sony sensor comparative to the kit lens that I had prior off of an NEX3, which was the, I believe, 18 to 55 manual focus, or manual zoom lens, I saw all the difference in the world, and that's what really started allowing me to use it, because with the Metabones, even the autofocus was working with video. So it wasn't the greatest and it was loud, but I was able to record audio externally, and because these were the parts or the equipment that I had already, is why I fell right into it automatically. It like serves dual purpose. And Craig, just to mention, just like I said before, that I'm using this softbox and this softbox that are designed for photography, but they're doing double duty because they're working as my active video softboxes right now, is the same way that I use my cameras, mostly for photography, but now they're so great when it comes to the hybrid form that, and Sony in particular is probably like the best when it comes to autofocus, that I don't even think that Panasonic's camcorders could really do it justice on how good this autofocus is. It really is. It really is good. Okay, so everyone is saying good night. Good night, good night, good night. Yep. And that's it. Great tip, thanks Lewis. Working iPad 1 sitting. Gretchen, I don't think it'll work on the iPad 1. I'm also very in tune with the Apple products, and I don't see, I know it, just the operating system on the iPad first generation is completely outdated. I'm not even sure if this application being old would even work on that one, but you could always give it a try, and that would be really cool if you could use an iPad first generation with this application, just to give it, how they say, breathe new life into the electronics. So all right, the song just finished there, and we're gonna call it a night. Guys, thank you as always for hanging out. I appreciate you spending your time here. It is highly appreciated, highly. And can't wait to do it all over again. We're going to be doing it the same time, same place next week, 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern. This was episode 63. I don't even think I mentioned that. So 63 in the books, and we're going to number 64. It's just, as always, as I tell you guys, the highlight of my week. Thank you, as always. I am now going to catch some UFC and some video editing while I wait for my little man to zone out and fall asleep. Guys, take care of yourselves and each other. Okay, I will see you next Saturday here, same time, same place. Take it easy, and I'll see you then.